The Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation. We created the Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation so you can magnetize the better relationships you want and focus on the positive role that you have in creating a better life through your relationships. We are excited for you to discover the gold within you that can help you manifest the love we all crave. The Building Better Relationships Journal has coaching questions that help you listen to the truth of what you want and what helps you to be empowered in love. The Building Better Relationships meditation is designed to strengthen your heart's ability to be that change you wish to see in the world. Why not download it now and think of it as a gift to those you love? If you love journaling and meditation, this is for you. Welcome to Building Better Relationships at Home and at Work with Angela and Patti podcast. This is Patti, a leadership and work-life balance coach from Arizona, USA.
And this is Angela, love and relationship coach from Sydney, Australia. And we are building better relationships with you.
Sharing new perspectives on being heart-centered at home and at work.
So you can draw on your inner power to make your relationships and the world a better place to be around.
Hi, Patti.
Hi, Angela. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here with us. So many people are exhausted, not because they're doing too much, but because they're holding on to too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the emotional load at home and at work and how to stop carrying it all. How many of us out there feel like we're carrying everything, like the weight on our shoulders? Between work, home, everything that we do, we feel like we're just drowning inside with it all. What do you think, Angela?
It's interesting because these times, with all of the stuff going on in the world, people are more aware of it, that they're carrying all that stuff. But I could say the same thing for my mum in the 70s, for example. She was very verbal about the emotional load. And she was a very loud, non-verbal communicator as well, like her sighs or she'd just be frustrated. Her anxiety was very palpable. Like I grew up with someone who was a very strong communicator of carrying a lot of stuff. But now it's very common. Everyone is kind of feeling it. So I find that really interesting. Carrying it all. It sort of has just sort of incrementally exponentialized quickly, not incrementally, it's exponentialized for people, that burden, that sense, perhaps because we're meant to learn something. I wonder what that could be. We're going to explore. So if you've noticed this growing sense of anxiety or whatever you're feeling about that emotional load, maybe you've noticed that it's also turned up in the volume for you. Maybe you've noticed that when you come home, there's something that's replaying the day. There's something in your brain that won't shut off. You're thinking about something that you have to do, you should be doing. You're scared about something that you forgot to do. I had that one. So I know there's something I'm meant to do, but I don't know what it is. You're thinking about the shopping, what to cook for dinner, the washing, the next thing, that machine keeps going around. This is something that you could see as a mental load of modern living, but it's actually also the emotional load of everybody else's needs that need to be met or want to be met. So underneath that sort of modern lifestyle living is often this pattern of, especially people that deeply care about other people, or you could be a caretaker, parent, or someone who looks after people. You're often also a people pleaser, but not only people pleasers have this pattern of operating. You could be just an empath or deeply connected to other people's feelings. People could be loving people, you could be just worried about your kids, you could be highly sensitive. And underneath that is this human need to make sure that everyone's okay, so that you can feel okay. It's kind of can be the carer, but it can go into over caring. So it can manifest as people that are very busy trying to make sure things get done. But underneath that, there's this emotional burden wanting to make sure that other people's needs are met. So you actually don't feel uncomfortable that other people's needs may not be met. So what today's podcast is going to explore is one of my favorite things is the invisible work that many people carry. I've talked about this with a lot of my friends who are in the support professions, healthcare, helping professions. We are actually often underpaid compared to people in the business world. And it's this invisible work that we do that should be, in my opinion, better paid than people in the economic world. But now, because the emotional load's getting so large in our society, the burden is getting bigger. And I think it's not able, the healthcare professions and support professions aren't able to support people because there's a lot more of the emotional load that everybody on the planet is taking home with them. So the emotional load is that invisible work that people do. And we're going to be looking at how that manifests in your thoughts and your feelings and your state, your emotional state. It can also affect your body, but we're going to be focusing on the thoughts and the feelings today.
We're also going to be exploring how it shows up both at work and at home, and why people who care deeply often carry more than their share. The key points that we're going to explore is emotional load is not just a task or a responsibility. It's the mental tracking, anticipation, remembering, and managing feelings. And Angela, have you noticed that it seems that people around us, they seem to be quick to lash out, be very upset about what's going on around, and just very temperamental at times.
Flashpoints, yeah.
Things seem to upset us more than they used to in the past. That's what I'm seeing. Have you experienced that as well? One day I was driving down the road and I was looking around. All these people just looked mad, angry, upset, frustrated, overwhelmed, just not a smile on anybody's face. You're driving down the road and there's nobody smiling, nobody laughing, nobody singing the music. It just seems very sad. And that's what I was seeing. And then you go into the grocery store and everybody's just like with their cart, just getting their stuff, throwing it in the cart, and just nobody's friendly. Nobody's saying, hi, how's it, how are you doing? Or anything. It just seems really odd to me that there isn't any interaction and happiness and joy.
Yeah, I think where I am in Australia is a little bit less intense than USA right now, because I've had a lot of friends and colleagues in the US telling me it's intense over there, pockets of it here, and we have flashpoints, and I've noticed more flashpoints. And some of the people I'm around are a little bit less intensely driven, and some of the work environments that I'm interacting with right now have a lot going on. So they have to manage, be more receptive to people because it's more support work environments that I'm in right now. So they can't operate that way because it doesn't work in the environment that I'm in. So they're not sort of as cagey like that. But here, what I've seen is on the street driving and a couple of people just letting it rip, which is not very cool in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay to do that in Australia when you've had a few drinks at night on a Friday and a Saturday night and it's late. that's when the Australians all go crazy and they're out of control. But here during the day, if you let rip like that, it's kind of like, whoa. And things like justice and injustice here. So some people are getting really upset about things like that, which I think is similar globally. There's flashpoints. But astrologically as well, you may not be into astrology if you're watching this, but there is a lot of things that are lining up for this year, which is the year of the fire horse in Chinese astrology, to be a very fiery year. Flashpoints and things like that are going to be common. One suggestion about that is to think about what is that teaching us about things that we can no longer tolerate, and then how are we going to make change? Because there comes a point in life, I think our topic today, emotional load, is how to start making change. That's where we end up in the podcast, but you can't start making change until you actually start seeing what's not working. And the emotional load, people who do that, people who are, like we were saying, care too much, they tend to have this habit of letting things build, and then explode. I was talking to you, Patti, before we recorded about me having my explosion, and I can't tolerate things about people when they do things that are basically, I think, are like, what are you doing that for? And then I explode. And that's my habit. I have a very temperate, moderate sort of demeanor. And then if it gets to my limit, I explode and people are very surprised. But that's what I'm noticing with the collective. We kind of have to see the things that are not working and actually make changes. Before we make the change, we have to get to that flashpoint where we start to say, no, this is not going to work. We want something different. And I think, Patti, we might today in the podcast explore how to look at the emotions and thoughts so you don't get to such a big explosion, or you have an internal explosion. And so the external one can be less abrasive to the others around you, or we can maybe bring it to communication. Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. I think that's important to see how our environment has been reflecting the emotional load is just too much for people, and it's spilling out now.
It's very sad because you do want to see people smile and laugh, and you want to smile and laugh. And how are we going to get there is the question. What joy are you going to bring into your life when you're not feeling joyful at all?
One of the tricks of emotional overload is people who carry it all basically have this perception that they have to manage other people's emotions. We're not going to go too deep today where that comes from. We've explored in our podcast. You know me, it's all coming from our upbringing, culture. We have these perceptions that form. If you are a person who thinks you have to do it all, you tend to want to try and make other people happy all the time. So this is one perception, Patti, that maybe we can blast today. It's like, if people are unhappy, can you be okay with that? You don't have to say, I have to be okay with that. You have to start by saying, can I be okay with that when someone's unhappy? Or do I go into this really bad behavior of trying to feel like I can start to make them happy? For example, you might notice this as a micro habit. At the end of the day, you keep replaying something you said and how the other person responded. So that's a really big piece, looking at what's your go-to in managing other people's emotions internally. The other external kind of behavior is, do you default to being the planner or the problem solver? So this is one that really triggers me a lot because I tend to be the problem solver or detail-oriented person because I'm naturally good at details. Not all details. I'm good at technical details and planning. And I tend to also be the social planner in the family. So I can get frustrated that I end up having to work out some details. But it defaults to me because it's one of my strengths. So some people who tend to carry it all, you might be one of those people that is naturally good at something, or somehow you ended up in that role and you're like, how did this happen? So you can start to watch, maybe that's one of the areas that you notice in your life, does it upset you? Again, does it upset you? Or do you feel vindicated and energized by that? Not good or bad if it upsets you, or it's not good or bad if it vindicates you. It's something to look at. Is this load something that's wearing on me or energizing me? Because those are the things now when we're going through these times of emotional load being too much, to start looking at physical things that need to change, maybe with the way we organize and plan and relate to others about that, or emotional and mental perceptions about how we manage those relationships. So this is the third piece, which I'm going to hassle Patti about, because this part of holding what's unsaid in relationships and teams, it's a lot of what managers like yourself do at work for decades, and you've shared a lot in the podcasts about this. And one of the things you've shared with us is, like, as a manager, how you would review often how you operated at work and how you would think about your team members, how to help them move forward. But as someone who tends to do it all, there's also that part as a manager that would take people home with you, which you've helped us in a lot of podcasts to look at that habit. Wondering, with the topics that are unsaid, these are the things that I thought you could help us today to just call them out, and we can put them out there for managers or other people who work with teams or even families, and just bring him into verbalization so we can start to name them and start to become more aware of them. So, Patti, can you help us with articulating what are some of those unsaid topics?
Well, let me just reflect on what you said. For me, yes, I took people home with me emotionally. I would replay conversations, worry about what wasn't said, what was said, and take responsibility for how people were feeling long after the workday ended. And a lot of the unsaid were unspoken stress, resentment, disengagement, or fear of speaking up. And instead of addressing it or letting it go, I held it. Holding on to it is where the emotional load really starts to build. I didn't realize it at the time that I was doing that, but I absolutely took people home with me in my mind. I would replay the conversations in my head, what someone might have meant, what they didn't say, whether I said the right thing or if I should have handled something differently. It didn't stop when the workday ended. I would carry it into my evenings, my weekends, even into my sleep. I had a lot of restless nights because it was like a loop going over and over again with assumptions or playing the scenario over and over again. Sometimes I would hold on to it for days, even certain situations, months. I felt responsible for how they were feeling, how I was feeling, and I thought it was part of being a good manager or a caring leader or a good person. And a lot of the unsaid things were like, what's going on with this person? They seem overwhelmed. What's happening? Are they upset with me and not telling me? Why are they disengaged, bored, or are they just exhausted? Did I miss something? What should I have noticed? And instead of addressing those things directly, I would not address them at all. As time went on, I got better at addressing things, but there was a time when I didn't. And looking back, there was so much of the emotional load that I was carrying, what hadn't actually been spoken or asked of me. And I was carrying too much and I was overthinking. And I look back now and I wish I had said some things, because maybe if I had said some things, things would have been totally different and I wouldn't have been in this loop of assuming or beating myself up for things that I really shouldn't have been beating myself up for. Remember, emotional overload or load is not a personal failure. It's just something that sometimes we do. And how do we break that pattern?
Well, actually, one of our last podcasts, we were talking about being okay making mistakes when we're talking about support and how healthy support could operate. I was just curious, like, you in the past, you saw how you did carry so much emotional load. So what changed, and how did you sort of learn from carrying all of that?
Well, I noticed that it wasn't helping me at all, mentally, physically, emotionally, and that things needed to change. And that's when I realized I need to talk to people, ask questions, quit assuming things, quit carrying that what if scenarios in my mind, and just be in this loop. That conversation was important, even when it was very uncomfortable for them as well as for me. But learning that it was crucial for my well-being and for my team's well-being, that you actually sit down and talk about things, the unsaid. You don't want to, but it needs to be said. If you look back at your past, has there ever been something that you had wished that you had said to somebody and you have years of regret because you never did? It could be telling somebody, I love you. It could be telling somebody how much they mean to me. It could be what a difference they made in your life, or how you felt during that situation that you really felt you needed to talk about, but you didn't, and those years of regret because you didn't say anything. That can weigh on you very heavily, and it can weigh on you for years. It could weigh on you your whole lifetime because you left it unsaid.
So that is a really poignant way to identify that allowing the emotional load to persist is actually really hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've also understood is that it's because it's very unconscious. It's unconscious, these patterns that we have of letting things just slide, the uncomfortable things or the disconcerting things. We think it's normal in our head to be reviewing stuff and criticizing ourselves or worried about what the other person's thinking, and that builds up over time. So it's very unconscious. So today we're just bringing consciousness to some of these unconscious, slowly developed habits. And as we can see, Patti, from your experience, when you realize it's hurting you, then there's the option for change. Same thing, if you're seeing that people are carrying too much and things aren't working for them, it's a moment to sort of reflect and think, okay, what's not working? What can we change? We're going to explore how you can become more conscious of how this emotional load shows up in the home and work environments. And let's look at the home. In our home environment, it really shows up in what I was shared earlier about the emotional work that carers or family members do in relationships. So in support work, or the healthcare professions or the support professions, helping professions, those people get paid. But a large amount of that happens in our personal relationships, the caretaking role. So you might notice very subtly that there is one person, or it shifts between a few people, as the person in the family who's the emotional manager. They're the ones that everybody comes to talk to about their problems. They could be the one that people dump their stuff on. The listener. It cannot just be the listener, though. It can be someone that can be the fixer as well. The emotional manager is the one that somehow seems to take on this perception or idea that they have to ensure that people are happy. So a lot of mums fall into this role organically. But, I've spoken to many mums who don't really like this role. And then, similar to what you were sharing from your work experience, Patti, they've got to this point where they're like, no, you've got to work this out yourself because I'm not benefiting from this anymore. And in fact, I'm actually getting drained from it. So a lot of mothers get blamed for that shift when they start to step out of the caretaker role. But it's an important thing to understand that it's not always your job to make people happy and that you can't make people happy. So a lot of parents and mums go through that transition. They realize I can't make my kids happy, can't make my parents happy, the grandparents of the kids. So that's an important way to see how the emotional load starts to shift and become too much and then go to the point where you actually have to make a shift. So one thing to look at if you are the emotional manager is, were you always like this? Did you try to make your parents happy? Or maybe it was your school friends or maybe another group that you grew up with. Can you even remember when you first started doing this? And I'm not asking for you to actually get stuck in the story because I think that gets people stuck. For example, you were always looking after a parent when you grew up and you can get stuck in that story because you looked after that parent. That's why you fall into this emotional manager role. See the pattern. The story is important, but don't get stuck in it. See the pattern. I picked up the pattern of carrying other people's emotions because I did this for my parent. Because we're looking at the habit that's from that pattern, the habit that you have of wanting other people to be happy and then feeling guilty if you're not making them happy. There's also some of the emotional managers that manage the tone. So you might notice it shows up, this emotional load pattern shows up, you're carrying too much. If you feel very awkward, if there's conflict at home, or if someone's moody and depressed. I don't know if you have this, Patti. If you can't see the video, my facial expression is screwed up because I can't stand when someone in the house is negative. I actually feel my skin crawling. I get this dis-ease in my guts. I start to get really angry because I don't like people having negative moods around me because obviously that's how I had some moody people growing up. So it triggers this nervous system response. So when someone's upset in the house, I get this pull to try and change their mood. Talking about transition, before I used to do jokes, now I can get really crabby. So I don't always have the same response. I've noticed that I've changed in my responses. In my experience, I might naturally try to shift people's perception. It's like, why are you looking at it this way? You might be able to look at it that way. Now, in my younger years, I used to use jokes. I used to be quiet. I used to be silent. In my older years, I'm getting more like, I don't want to listen to this. This is not something I'm interested in hearing, because that emotional load, like you shared at work, your work experience, Patti, you got to the point where you realized it was unhealthy for me. I find that people in my environment that have a very negative outlook, it's just not something I want to engage with in my home environment. I might listen to it in another context, but in my home environment, I'm like, I'm not really interested in this. I don't have time for it. Can we talk about something else? And that's a big thing for me, because the emotional load was too much about always focusing on how the world is terrible, people are terrible, that person is terrible. I really have a strong dislike of that sort of communication in my home environment, because that's how we grew up. And it's a clue that having grown up in a family where the expectation was that I should just take negative commentary around in my environment as normal. And as I got older, I just realized, no, I don't have to accept certain things in my home environment. So it was actually good for me to learn how to articulate. It was good for me to grow up in an environment where negative commentary was acceptable, because I had to learn as an adult to articulate, actually, I don't like that in my home environment. I don't want to communicate about people like that in my home environment. And actually, I don't think people are like that. So I don't agree with you. To learn how to say I disagree with people in my home environment was a very important skill I learned from having the emotional load being too much for me. So it can be something to watch. Do you get cranky if there's certain emotional tones in your environment? Or are you sort of like, that's all right, that's their stuff, that's okay? That means you've got a really good emotional filter and you can handle the intensity of people's emotion. But it can also mean that you've learned over time to just adapt and accommodate people who've got negative or intense emotions, and you think you should be just carrying. So you have to start to see, is that emotional load appropriate in your home environment, or is it too much? Or are you too accommodating to other people's emotions? Those are some things to explore in your home environment. You might have some others after I shared. Anything that you wanted to share from anything I brought up just now, Patti?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, when you have somebody unloading on you and you're just like, oh, wow, where did this come from? And you're listening to all that unloading and negativity and everything, and you're taking it in. And how do you feel afterwards? I know I feel like icky. I don't like it. I don't really want to be around it. But we've all done it. We've taken it in and we've pushed it out. And then if you think about it, how did that person feel when I unloaded on them? Probably not good. I think I'm like you, Angela. I really don't want to listen to that because, number one, it doesn't feel good at all hearing negative stuff all the time. I think that's why a lot of people are isolating themselves, because they don't want to hear. They don't want to be around that. That's happening a lot too.
Didn't think about that. Yeah, it's a natural response to protect.
Yeah, to protect yourself from hearing, being affected to all the negativity. And then there's people that can't. They're at work, they're listening to people, they're in their car, the radio's telling them things. You go out somewhere and you're hearing others. You're seeing a television on. It's constant negative, which builds our emotions up because we're hearing that.
So we'll come back to that because I've got some tips on how to start shifting that load. And now we're going to explore how that emotional load manifests or shows up at work.
Say you're in a work environment that all there is toxic. That's all that's around you is toxic. People are unhappy. People are mad. People are angry. Everything is negative. That's really hard. And then you're trying to make everybody happy and change the environment, right? You're the one that's being the emotional buffer for the work environment. How's that working for you? Are you making a difference? I hope you are, but a lot of times it's not making any difference at all. You're taking responsibility for outcomes and that you can't control, or other people's mistakes. How's that feeling inside? How is that working for you? Like what I talked about earlier, it probably doesn't feel good and that's not working very well. And that's how emotional load leads to burnout, fatigue, and loss of joy and clarity and all of those things, because you're carrying that emotional load. You're taking all of that in and not breathing and letting it go. Dusting yourself off when you walk out that door. That can be hard. Let's explore together a few things like chronic exhaustion, resentment and emotional numbness, decision fatigue, loss of joy or creativity, feeling unappreciated or invisible. How many of these things that I just said are you experiencing? And how can you release it? Those are good questions, because a lot of us, walk around numb from many years of pushing things down or taking that emotional stuff in. We're just very exhausted, fatigued, decision fatigued. I can't make one more decision. I just can't. You just shut down when you're at decision fatigue because you're making all the decisions, and there comes to a point after years and years of doing it, you just feel like you can't anymore. You just can't take on one more thing. Joy. Are you doing anything in your life that has joy? Are you creative? Have you lost your creativity? That's a sign that you're not doing things that you enjoy, that you're not having a little bit of fun, creating, doing a painting, doing something that you enjoy, that you love. And then there's times where you're feeling unappreciative or invisible. I remember watching the show one time, and this lady said that she felt invisible. And I thought, how sad feeling invisible. What can you do to change that so that people see you, that you're heard, those kind of things? Just remember, just because you can carry it doesn't mean you should, or it's your responsibility. And I think a lot of times when we're watching all of this negative stuff, it just builds up, and it's like, oh, I just want to do something about this, but you don't know how or why.
What you shared about not having joy and losing your creativity, I thought that was a very important piece around why do we have this experience of having emotional load and taking on all these emotions. It's literally our spirit and our human nature begging us to come back to a more authentic way of being. It doesn't mean we have to be joyful and happy all the time, but it's literally a wake-up call. So that flashpoint that we started talking about at the beginning of the episode, where people are losing their stuff because of how the world is, or just they can't handle the emotional load of everything in their personal lives and the world. It's also a wake-up call to, what are you suppressing in yourself? What are you tolerating that is suppressing what you really want?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a very big clue as to how to start releasing. I didn't think about that until you shared it, Patti, about the creativity and the joy, and how that emotional load bearers, one of the biggest pieces that can start you exploring how to start releasing the load is what is actually lacking and missing in your joy or your life that you really, really want, because that will start to direct you in directions instead of just, I'm not going to do this anymore, in more creative directions.
Mm-hmm.
So if it feels hard for you to start letting go of it all, don't think that that's unnatural. It's very normal to try and stay the same, because we want to embody those patterns that we grew up with. But today's podcast is all about recognizing the unsaid things, the unconscious behaviors, bringing them to consciousness. And as I was sharing with what Patti just inspired me to explore, what is the habit of taking on emotional load? What is that suggesting to me or pointing to me that I'm not exploring, that I really want to explore? And what other things might make it feel so hard, Patti, to let go?
Yeah, I think the fear of things falling apart around you, the belief if I don't do it, it won't get done right. I think fear of what I left unsaid, fear of what I said. Fear is a big part of it happening, what you're thinking, why you're thinking maybe the way you're thinking.
And one of the thoughts could be that, like you said, if I don't do it, it won't get done right. It can be feeling that you're abandoning a certain role that you've played for a long time. So you're a bad girl or a bad boy. You're not playing the good girl or the good boy role that you grew up playing. So one of the ways to shift that can be that letting go is not abandoning looking after others. It's actually opening up something else. But it's not that.
It's creating space for a healthier connection with yourself and with others.
I love that. Let's look at some tips about how to start releasing the emotional load.
Acknowledge what you're carrying and start separating it from what's yours and what isn't yours.
Yeah. And one of the ways to understand what's yours and what isn't is to identify the needs. So what's your need? What's the need of the other? And articulating that rather than blaming someone because it's all too much. Getting down to our needs can start to identify some really practical things, some emotional needs you might have, some need for space. Maybe you need space, or I articulated earlier, I need a certain tone in my environment for my living environment. So I need to articulate that, but I need to identify it first. And the second piece is then inviting others to be creative with you in how some of the responsibility about tasks can be divided up. So if you're the managing type person, maybe you can say, I don't want to do this anymore. Can you do this? Can you do that? Inviting people to do things that you don't want to do, inviting for things to be different, to be discussed about how we can do this differently.
And one of the things that you can also do is say no without over-explaining. It's okay to say no when there's something that you don't want to do. You don't need to say a whole bunch of stuff to feel that you need to validate it. Allow others to manage their own emotions. Letting discomfort be part of your growth. Like I had said earlier, have those conversations that are uncomfortable but need to be said, and listen to what the other person is feeling as well, and opening up that communication, because you may be assuming something that is not even close to what reality is with that person. And once you start talking about it and you both open up about it, you find out there was a lot of assumptions that shouldn't have been there.
And we've got a reflection question for you to explore your emotional load. Patti, can you share it?
Sure. What emotional load am I carrying that no one asked me to hold? This is a great reflection question when you're overthinking, and things are feeling a little bit out of control. You can sit down and focus. Am I carrying this and I shouldn't be? Or what can I do to solve this so I can let it go?
What I love about the question, it's very simple, and just in asking it, there's a permission. You're giving yourself permission to lay down anything that's not yours or you don't need to carry. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Now we have our affirmation.
So today we're going to give 2 affirmations and use the one that resonates within you, or both of them. I am allowed to put down what was never mine to carry. I'm allowed to show up without carrying it at all.
Those are so wonderful.
Angela and I would like to encourage you to really think about the reflection questions and the affirmations and what the key messages were for the podcast. You don't have to carry everything to be loving, capable, or supportive. Shared emotional responsibility builds stronger relationships. And we just wanted to thank you for being here with us. And in our next episode, we will explore how your body holds relationship stress and how to release it. So these two will work hand in hand together. And we invite you to be part of a conversation and let us know what you learned from this episode or what you've been carrying that you're going to release. And please share this episode with others.
Thank you, Patti.
Thank you, Angela.